Welcome to Bringing Life to Scholarship. If you're watching this presentation live on simulcast, you can mail us questions at any time during the presentation by clicking the Ask button. This and previous presentations are archived and available by contacting the Herbert H. and Grace A. Dow College of Health Professions at cmu.edu. Today's presentation will be given by Dr. Mike Stewart. Dr. Stewart is a professor in the audiology department in the School of Communication Disorders. He has been teaching at Central Michigan University for 18 years. He has a private practice in hearing assessment and conservation based on the OSHA occupational noise standards. He has several publications in the area of recreational and occupational hearing loss attributed to excessive noise. These include studies with industrial workers, farming populations, workers in the wood industry, musicians, and recreational firearm users. Dr. Stewart's research area of interest is in noise-induced hearing loss in various subpopulations. He has directed many doctoral projects and presented his research throughout the country. His presentation today will be on hearing and firearm noise exposure.
Thank you, sir. The reason I'm here today is I wasn't able to duck under my desk fast enough when I saw Rich coming down the hall, and he finally did collar me into doing this. So I'm really glad to do it because I think it's an area that a lot of people are not aware on how dangerous these firearms can be. Just like music, you might have been watching things about the iPod and all that recently, and a lot of that is people are just not aware that these devices, firearms, musical instruments, things that we use all the time can cause serious hearing loss because it's usually gradual and painless and occurs over time, and by the time you notice it, it's too late. So I'm glad to do this, and I hope that people will use some of this information to protect themselves from seeing us later in the clinic with a noise-induced hearing loss. Today's topic is recreational firearm noise exposure, or as I like to affectionately call it, hunting and hearing. And that's where most of the damage comes in, is actually during hunting, because during target practice most people are protecting themselves, although we'll look at some data today that shows that that's not always the case. So today I'd like to talk about the effects of excessive firearm noise on hearing, also on how we hear and how noise causes hearing loss, on how hearing loss then affects speech intelligibility, or the ability to understand speech, which is really the bottom line here. We'll look at some noise levels that firearms are able to generate and make some comments on that. Look at some high-risk firearm noise exposure situations that people get themselves into all the time, where damage can be done with one shot, and you can be a hearing aid candidate with one shot in some of these situations, and we'll look at those. And also I'd like to review real quickly, if I have time, some of the studies that we've done in this area using our students and students doing it as doc projects, and finally protecting your hearing from firearm noise. Well, the effects of firearm noise on hearing, first of all, it can be temporary or permanent. It can be in both ears. Usually with firearms, the left ear for right-handed shooters is more affected. It's referred to as a gun blast ear. When you shoulder a firearm, your left ear is closer to the bore and directly in line with it. And so usually we see a left ear effect with right-handed shooters, and obviously about 90% of the population is right-handed, so we see that a lot clinically, and we call it the hunter's audiogram. The loss may occur gradually, suddenly, or both. It could occur over long periods, several years, like you might get in an industrial setting with occupational noise, or it could occur with one acoustic trauma incident, or it could involve gradual loss and then an acoustic trauma incident on top of that. You usually get ringing. That's probably the first symptom. A lot of people are not even aware of the hearing loss, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But usually you'll get ringing, and if you get ringing after you've been exposed to noise, you've probably caused some damage, or at least you've been exposed to levels loud enough to cause damage. And that ringing may be constant, and it may stay with you forever. It's a high frequency loss, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Some people are not aware that they even have the loss, and they think that that they hear fine, that people are just not speaking clearly. And there is a critical level for gunfire noise and for impulse noise in general. And the research has shown that you can take a lot of impulses below this level, say about 160 decibels. Well, it depends on how long it is too, but typically a firearm noise is about 2 milliseconds, 3 milliseconds long. You can take a lot of these if you stay under this level. But if you go over that level, you can take very few without causing a lot of damage to the inner ear. And everyone's critical level is different, and it depends on a lot of different factors like ear canal residence, their general health, eye color, surprisingly, the melanin that's in their inner ear. And so there's a lot of individual factors that can come into play here. So we don't know what the critical level is for everyone, but we know that when it gets around 150 decibels, 2 or 3 milliseconds long, that we're heading for trouble. Just real brief, I want to show you how we hear and how noise causes hearing loss. You can see anytime there's a vibration, right now I'm talking, my vocal cords are vibrating, it's sending out vibrations in the air particles. Those enter the external ear, strikes the eardrum or tympanic membrane, and is amplified by the middle ear, and then goes into the cochlea. And the cochlea is Latin for snail because it looks like a snail. It winds around 2.5 times. And you can see a close-up here. Within this is a membrane that runs the entire length of it. And within that membrane are tiny hair cells that really process the sound. They pick up the vibrations in this fluid-filled sac, which, by the way, is encased in the temporal bone. So there's nowhere for this pressure to go, this hydromechanical pressure to go once it is delivered in there, if there's a lot of it. And it's got to be absorbed by the structures, and that's where the damage can occur very quickly. You can see that this is a little section right here, and here are the hair cells that pick up the sound, or not really pick it up, but process the sound and deliver it to the brain. And here's a close-up of those hair cells here, and they do sit on this membrane called the basilar membrane, and there is a traveling wave in the cochlea that stimulates those hair cells, and they process the sound, deliver it to the brain via the cochlear nerve. And I'll show you how this membrane here moves. Now this is I got this off the web, and it does make the point. It's not exactly how it happens, but it does show you that this organ does respond to sound and how it does respond to sound. This is a wave action of the basilar membrane, and the amplitude of that wave gets higher the louder the sound, and you can see where these tiny little hair cells could become damaged very easily because of all this motion that's going on in the inner ear. And like I say, there's nowhere for this energy to escape because it's in this fluid-filled sac that's encased in bone. This is a picture from NHCA, National Hearing Conservation Association, actually done down in Ohio State Labs, of an electron microscopic picture of a healthy inner ear. This is where the middle ear comes in, and it winds around, and actually it's going that way. And you can see the basilar membrane here is this gray area with the tiny hair cells are on this membrane, and these are the eighth nerve, the dendrites of the eighth nerve coming up the interface with the hair cells. And that's a healthy cochlea. And this is a cochlea that from a 55-year-old man. I used to think 55-year-old men, I used to do this a long time ago. I thought, man, that is really old, okay? Now it's young. So a young man in prime of life, and you can see the basilar membrane, and it stops right here, okay? And it's just wiped out, and then obviously there's retrograde degeneration. The eighth nerve dendrites degenerate, and so you can see that this person is not going to get a complete signal to the brain. And that is actually from a 55-year-old man who was an avid shooter. Close-up of the hair cells these are normal hair cells. These are your hair cells on noise. And you can see the type of damage that's done there, and there's an awful lot of damage done not only to the hair cells themselves. You can view these as sort of the receptors of sound that pick up the vibrations and process them, and actually deliver them to the inner hair cells, and then they go to the brain. And you can see that this ear is not going to process sound very well. And the problem with trying to fit a hearing aid to this ear is that we still have this inherent damage. And so it's never going to be a real clear signal, even if we make it louder. And that's the problem with fitting people with noise-induced hearing losses, especially ones that involve the high frequencies only. It's very difficult for them sometimes to get a lot of benefit from amplification because we are having to go through these hair cells that are impaired. And some of them damaged beyond the point where they can process sound. Here's the effect on speech intelligibility. This is what typically happens is we get a high frequency drop off. This is an audiogram, it's a picture of your hearing. This is the how loud we have to make it before you're barely able to hear. And this is the pitch range or frequency range over which we do hear. And we can see that what we call the speech banana is superimposed on this audiogram. You can hear anything, red is right ear, left is blue is left ear. Anything under your audiogram you can hear. So you can hear the vowels very well. You don't hear the consonant sounds very well. And unfortunately, the loudness is carried on the vowels, but the clarity is carried on the consonant sounds. So a person that has this type of loss, and I love to do this demonstration, sort of sounds like this. You can hear them loud enough, but you just can't hear them very clear. The main complaint that they have is, hey, I hear fine. I hear environmental sounds. I hear people walking in and out. I hear the door shutting. I hear dogs barking. I just can't understand my wife. Well, okay. I can't do anything for perceptual problems, but for hearing acuity problems, we can help you a little bit. The problem here is that, and they always say, you know, people are mumbling, they're not speaking up, and basically what's happening is their ears are filtering out the high-frequency consonant sounds. They're getting the vowels, they're getting the loudness of speech, they're not getting the clarity of speech, and when we amplify a signal like I just showed you, it doesn't clear up that much in many cases. Although we do have selective amplification, we're getting better and better at that. And I don't want to say anything bad about amplification because I make my living doing it. But if you can avoid it, you know, try not to come and see us, okay? And try to protect yourself because this is a permanent loss. It's a situation that is not easily remediated. How loud are guns? Well, there's quite a range on these guns. The 22 is a small rifle, it's about 140 decibels, all the way up to a large pistol, a 44 Magnum, the old Clint Eastwood, you know, make my day punk or whatever. That's about 171 decibels. You can increase this if you get a shorter barrel, if you get a muzzle brake, or if you shoot in an enclosed area. You can increase these significantly. And typically these time-wise, temporal characteristics are on the order of 2 to 3 milliseconds. So it's very quick, but it's very loud, and it sets up a huge wave in the cochlea. And those hair cells are sometimes torn right out of their sockets or torn out of the membrane. And once that happens, they're gone forever. Typically people are using this gun and this gun, this gun and this gun for hunting, and we'll look at that in a minute. And they are quite loud, the 12-gauge shotgun and the 30-06 rifle specifically. Or as some of the students refer to it at the 30-006. I had to get that in there. High-risk noise exposures. Let's look at these because this is what happens in the field, and then these people come in to see us clinically. And these are dangerous situations where a lot of damage can be done very quickly, and once it's done forever. Duck blinds, they're really bad. 3 or 4 guys at once, they're all shooting at ducks. Usually the ducks are way too high to hit, but they shoot at them anyway. And you have maybe 5 or 6 guys in a blind, they each have 3 shots, and they shoot all those in 3 or 4 seconds, and it's like it says, bang, 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 15 shots in 3 seconds. That's an awful lot of energy for your ear to absorb. Some of those shots are simultaneously. Some of these people are swinging their guns around, and they're getting the barrel close to their other buddy's head or ear, and this is a situation that's very dangerous. I would try to avoid that and buy your ducks at Myers. Exposure time, this is another situation where they're doing it as a joke. They're all trying to shoot at the same time to make a big boom. Problem is that really increases the sound level significantly. Very common, almost all shooting clubs have this. Unfortunately, tin roofs and concrete floors set up a very reverberant environment. And when that happens, you get not only the direct sound, but you get reverberation, which serves to increase the sound pressure level about 6 decibels. So in many cases, these shooting guns in these situations can make a dangerous gun even more dangerous in terms of the levels that's being delivered to the ear. So you can add, in this situation, I've done the calculation, you can add a gazillion dB, which is a huge number. But this is probably the most dangerous situation. I see in law, we see law enforcement officers. I see a lot of I have an office in East Lansing, and I see a lot of Ingham County deputies and state police that come in that have been involved in indoor ranges. And the problem is they're using big bore guns, and they're in line, and they have these reflective surfaces. And a lot of times these indoor ranges are made out of concrete, and these are actually steel pillars, and very, very dangerous situation. You're getting not only sound from the bore of the gun, but you're getting sound out of the action also when you do this inline shooting. And so these guys are actually right in line with each other. And the problem happens when someone takes off their ear protection to talk to someone or to examine their gun, and everyone else keeps shooting. And that is a situation where you can get acoustic trauma. Another situation, this guy's trying to help this little girl shoot, but he's really putting himself at risk in terms of the position of his head. Most of the sound goes out and to the side, and some of it does come back, but out and to the side is a lot louder than the person actually shooting the firearm. This guy really should know better. He's got a degree in audiology. He's been studying this for years, but yet he's shooting a big bore rifle, no ear protection, with a reflective surface. And that is extremely dangerous when you're doing that with a reflective surface, because the firearm sound is going to hit that wall and come right back at the individual. And I've seen people that have leaned against trees or shot at game in a woods, and there's been a tree right here, and it hits that tree and comes right back, and it can cause a lot of problems very quickly. Firearm muzzle brakes. You know, these things are designed to reduce recoil, and they do a great job of it. But the problem is, what it does is there are small holes drilled in the end of the barrel, and it releases the gases out to the side and to the rear, and it counteracts the projectile being shot out of the barrel, and so you get a lot less recoil. Problem is when it's releasing those gases, it's also releasing sound pressure level back toward the shooter. And you can add 11 decibels using muzzle brakes. And I tell people a couple years ago they came out with a firearm that was very popular, and it came standard with a muzzle brake from the manufacturer. And I've talked to people that were guides around the country, and they wouldn't even let these guns in camp because they were so loud. And they had a lawsuit, and since then I think they put warning labels on it or discontinued it. But muzzle brakes are great for reducing recoil, but they significantly increase the sound pressure level, probably more than any other factor. And if you combine shooting a big bore pistol with a short barrel and a muzzle brake inside of a blind, then you can call our 800 number and get an appointment. That's a close-up of an example of a muzzle brake. There are some things that you can do in the field to increase your risk, and I think a rule of thumb here is that the bigger the bore, the more powder, the shorter the barrel, the bigger the boom. I mean, it's real easy to remember, and it's just logical. Shooting in groups, obviously that's very difficult, or that can increase the sound pressure levels significantly. Shooting inside a blind or an enclosure, and a lot of deer hunters use blinds, and they shoot in enclosures like blinds. That just increases the sound pressure because you get reverberation. Some indoor ranges, depending on how they're designed, straight line blast like we saw a minute ago, reflective surfaces, tin roofs and concrete floors, and then also muzzle brakes. All these things can increase your risk, and these are things that you want to avoid when you're shooting. We're going to look at some of the research that we've done in the past 6 or 7 years here. on firearm noise exposure. We've looked at adult shooting habits. A long time ago we did that, one of the first ones. We looked at youth shooting habits, 13 through 19-year-olds. We've looked at hearing loss and hearing handicap in shooters. We've looked at shooting habits of deer hunters. In particular, we've looked at tinnitus or ringing in shooters, in shooting populations. We just completed, and it's over here, we're going to be presenting this next week in Tampa. And I really hate to go down to Florida this time of year. I mean, I heard it's just hot and sunny, and to leave this beautiful, cold, frigid air, I don't know if I can do it. But, it's a tough job. Somebody's got to do it, and I'll volunteer, okay? We're going to present this paper at the National Hearing Conservation Association. Last year's paper that we presented on noise exposures in the fishing industry by Liz Beal actually won Poster of the Year, and we have high hopes for this one too. The media department helped us put this together, and it's very well done. And this reflects some of the, this is actually a doc project from Andrea Wagner's doc project. And we'll be taking that down there next, we'll be leaving Tuesday, we'll be down there Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. And so hopefully that'll do well there. That's this data right here, the adult shooting habits, and we kind of tuned up the survey and added some things that we didn't have before. All the data was collected at Jay's, and I invited Jeff Poet, who is the owner of Jay's, down here, and along with his brother, and he's at a gun show in the biggest one in the United States in Los Angeles this week, and so he couldn't come. But I really want to thank him because he has been so supportive. He has given people $5 gift certificates to participate in our studies. He's let us set up tables. He let us set up mobile units. He's done a lot for us. I used to think that $5 gift certificate, I used to think, boy, that was really nice of him. But then I think, you know what? If someone gives me $5 and goes in, or $5 to go into Jay's, I'm going to spend $50. So actually, it's probably a pretty good marketing move on his part. But he's been very supportive. He doesn't have to do this, but yet every year when we call him, he's more than willing. And I certainly appreciate it, and I wish he was here to tell him that directly. And I've told him that before, and I've kept him abreast of everything that we've done. This is a result of the study that we did recently, and here are our data collectors. And it's really neat, because we do involve all the students, and they go out and collect this data, and they talk to the people that they're collecting the data from. They get a lot of insight about what these guys are doing and what they shouldn't be doing and what they wish they wouldn't have done. They watch the data be tabulated. They watch the graphs grow. They watch see the finished situation or finished product, and I just think it's a really good learning situation. And we try to involve as many as we can, because obviously the more people we have, the more data we are going to collect, and we usually have pretty good numbers. We wanted in this particular one to look at shooting habits and to also get information on the prevalence of hearing loss and tinnitus as self-reported. And we did have almost 300 people here. We had a survey that we gave, and basically we just approached them as they came into Jay's and said, hey, would you like to participate in the survey? And we gave them a free pair of hearing protection for doing that. You can see the demographics here. We had 18 to 83, mostly males, although we have one right now that we're going to be doing very shortly. Is Rie here? Yep. We're going to do it very shortly. It's going to be women only. So we're going to compare that data to this data to see whether or not there's a difference in the shooting habits and how much they protect themselves. And so that will be very interesting data as that starts to come in. Half of these people are exposed to occupational noise, and I've done a lot of studies with occupational noise because I do have a hearing conservation service that I've had since, I hate to even say it, 1979. And I get a lot of data from that pool, and a lot of people that work in industry do shoot, and so we've looked at that a lot and basically found out that, yeah, there's a lot of hearing loss in industry, but the shooters have a lot more hearing loss than their non-shooting counterparts in industry. So these people are already being exposed to high levels of noise on the job, and then they go home and do noisy hobbies and maybe shoot a lot of firearms, so they really get a lot. And there's the demographics in terms of the reported occupation. And the number of years shooting goes kind of along with the age here. these are the number of shots fired. I'm not going to show you all the data. There's all the data right there. We'll just get some select data here that's of interest. If you want to look at it closer, you're more than welcome to, and I'll answer any questions that you'd like. Most people shoot, most of the shots take place during target practice rather than large or small game hunting. This data always worries me because I look at this and I'm thinking, why would anybody do this? This shows the type of protection used: plugs, muffs, combo, and electronic ear protection, and then none. And I can't understand why about 15%, and that's been steady at 15%, of the population that shoot firearms never use ear protection during target practice, when in fact ear protection can improve their accuracy. You don't get the flinch that you get from the big boom, and there's no reason not to use it because you're not monitoring your environment auditorily. You're usually focused on a target. It's 100 yards downrange, and I just can't understand this, but we continue to get about 15% that say, I don't use ear protection ever. This is a little bit disturbing too, because we looked at it as a function of age, and we found out that the older people who probably already have more hearing loss use ear protection less during target practice. And this is kind of disturbing here too, that only about 22% of the very youngest people report using hearing protection 100% of the time. This group here seems to be the smarter group all the way through. So that tells you something about the demographics and the people who are putting themselves at risk. And hunting, and I've been harping on this for years, and we've been trying to market electronic ear protection for shooters. You can get it in many forms. We'll look at it later. For use during hunting, and just not very many people, no matter what age group, no matter what occupation, no matter what gender, they just don't use hearing protection while shooting. And that's where most of the acoustic trauma accidents occur. Somebody shoots a big bore rifle inside a blind 3 or 4 times at a deer running by, or they're in a duck blind, and I watch TV shows all the time where duck hunters are shooting and they're laying down in the frozen tundra, and the ducks come in and all of them jump out and start shooting, and not one of them has ear protection on. And I've even contacted the shows and said, tried to talk to them about that, but it's a subject that a lot of people don't want to talk about because they think, well, you're being anti-gun, and that's not the case at all. The case is we're trying to preserve hearing here, and you just need to use some common sense. Firearms, just like anything else, have a use and they're useful, but you have to have some common sense when you do use them. I show you this data because we were looking at the favorite firearms for small game hunting, and guess what? The 12 gauge is the favorite, and it's also the loudest. Okay, and same thing for large game hunting. The favorite one is the 30-06, which is one of the loudest weapons that you can purchase. So the favorite guns are the loudest guns. I want you to look at this right here as I'll click through this fast, and you can get I call this the 10-20-30 rule. These people here are saying, or this graph shows that these people for the right ear are saying percentage-wise either poor or fair hearing. This is self-assessed, but we've backed this up with audiometrics, and we know that it's true. And you can see how these numbers, just keep your eye on this black, which is poor, and fair as we go through the age group, and you can see how they grow from, we can do that, we can do a little special effects here too real quick. You can see how they grow from 10%, if you combine them, to 20%, 10%, 20%, 30%. And they follow what we know about hunters is the left ear. More of them show the left ear either fair or poor than the right. And I can tell you one thing about these guys is that when they say they have fair hearing, they mean poor, okay? And when they say they have good hearing, they mean fair, all right? So you can always look at what they say, and you can always downgrade it by about one category because they're sometimes not aware, or they're in denial about their hearing loss. And so these numbers are actually greater. And I'll show you some actual data that we did collect at Jay's that we did audiometrics. Not very many of them use hearing aids, even though 30% say their hearing are fair and poor. In that age group, only about 3% wear hearing aids. The tinnitus, constant tinnitus, about 20% of this population experiences constant tinnitus, which is a much smaller percentage in the general population. And these are the degrees. Usually it's mild, but it's there all the time. And that's one of the symptoms of this type of hearing loss, is that you will get this ringing. About half of them say that they experience tinnitus after shooting. And that's a bad sign, because that usually means that those little hair cells have been rocked to the core, and you can't do that too many times without those hair cells being permanently damaged. And we had 20% of the people saying that they had at least 10 incidences or more last year where they experienced tinnitus after shooting. It tells you that they're putting themselves at pretty good risk here. Well, what did we learn from this study? Well, we learned that there's some, all population subgroups are engaging in risky shooting behaviors. Tinnitus and hearing loss fairly prevalent in this population. And this is a special clinical group that needs special hearing conservation intervention and counseling. We really want to try to change these habits so that they don't cause damage to their hearing. This is another one we did. This was published in our professional journal, Journal of American Academy of Audiology, a couple years ago. And you can see we had a mobile unit set right up at Jay's, and that's where Jeff gave us the $5 coupons for people that would get a hearing test. And we ended up generating pretty good numbers. We wanted to look at the demographics again. We wanted to look at audiometric status and hearing handicap. And we wanted to look at the relationship between the hearing handicap and various pure tone clusters, which I won't get into that, but we'll look at the main things here. Again, we had large numbers, 232 shooters, same age group, 81% males. We did have a questionnaire that we gave them. If they failed the hearing test at any frequency in any year, we gave them the hearing handicap inventory, which is a self-assessed report on how bad they think their hearing is and how much it affects their life in the social aspect and emotional aspect. So we collected that data, and we were doing correlations between hearing loss and self-reported hearing handicap scores. We did approach them, and we offered them a $5 gift certificate to participate. And here are the, again, selected results here. We have the same kind of breakdown. We had a little bit more females than we've had in the past. This is a scary number. Mean number of unprotected shots reported last year, 241. It was real variable. Some people reported 5,000. A lot of people reported 0. We tried to do different stats on this, like looking at the median value. The median value was 0. Because median value is obviously 50% were above this and 50% were below. A lot of people had no unprotected shots, but a lot of people had thousands of unprotected shots. And so it wasn't, that's why we tuned this up a little bit, because we weren't able to make sense and do anything that made sense statistically to this data. You can't see this real well, but these are the white collar. This is the mean white collar audiogram, and obviously the mean blue collar audiogram across the frequency range, averaged over both ears, the amount of hearing loss across the pitch or frequency range, and you can see that a lot more hearing loss in the blue collar population than the industrial worker because of not only the exposure they get on the job, but also their shooting habits. And we keep finding this as they shoot about 2.5 times more than the white-collar worker in terms of their reported number of unprotected shots, and about 6 times more than the average female shooter. And so these guys are all hearing aid candidates, or this, I can't say all of them, but the average blue-collar shooter would be considered a hearing aid candidate if he came into this clinic. As a function of age, and you can see how quickly this drops off. These are the young people, 18 to 30, 31 to 50, and then over 50. The average shooter over 50 is clearly a hearing aid candidate. And these are the results of the hearing handicap inventory that go along with the audiometrics. And I won't spend a lot of time on that, but you can see that just like the audiograms, there's more hearing handicap reported in the blue-collar population, and there's more hearing handicap reported as the people get older, just like we found with the audiometrics. High-frequency hearing loss is very prevalent in this population, especially in the older subpopulation. The degree of self-reported hearing handicap was directly proportional to the degree of high-frequency hearing loss, which we knew that going in, and that there are specific subgroups that really need our attention and that we need to target these groups for intervention. Let's look at a few ways that we can protect ourselves from the effects of firearm noise exposure or any type of excessive noise exposure. We can use the conventional EAR plug, the little yellow foam plug. These are great. They give you really good attenuation. They probably have more attenuation than any plug available on the market. They have to be inserted correctly for them to be effective, but they are very effective when used properly. And that's probably the most commonly used type of ear protection for all types of noise. Then we have the circumorals or the headsets. These are kind of bulky. They don't fit well over a hunting hat. They are great for target practice, and also if you want to double protect, you'd put the foam plugs in and the circumorals on top of that. And that would be the safest situation. That would be the best pair of ear protection that you could get. The custom stuff, you can have it custom made. A lot of people do this. A lot of the shooters that shoot all the time do this, the trap shooters and the people that travel around on the trap shooting circuit. This is what I recommend for hunting, or for because you really need, when you're hunting, you really need to be able to monitor your environment auditorily. Most hunters will tell you that they hear the game coming long before they see the game coming, and so that's very important to them. And also, I don't think you'd want to be sitting in a deer blind or in a blind with earplugs in and have a friend walk up from the side. It might not be a good situation. Could turn into a real bad situation just by the way you may react to that. These are example of electronic ear protection that you can get pretty inexpensive. It's pretty expensive. You can get them through Cabela's. You can buy them up at Jay's. You can buy them in almost any sporting goods store. They are around $150. They offer great protection. The problem is that they are bulky. I've tested all these out. I've got a whole bunch of these in my drawer at home from testing these for different manufacturers and then doing a little report on them. The only problem is this microphone faces this way, so you get a lot of wind noise, and your ability to localize is very poor. You can, if you're sitting in a blind and a blue jay lands over here, you know the blue jay is over here when he starts squawking, but you don't know exactly where the blue jay is. He's just sort of over here somewhere because you're covering your ears, and these are your localizers. This is how you localize sound, is by having sound reflect off these little cracks and crevices, and it tells your brain where the sound is coming from. Well, when you cover the ears, you really cut down on the ability to localize sound. These are the three main types of electronic ear protection. You can buy this out of Cabela's or any sporting goods stores. It comes with a one-size-fits-all. This is the weak link, and the whole deal right here is this tube. So the whole device, the attenuation of the whole device really depends on the attenuation of that tube. These are the best. They're comfortable. They're made out of a dental acrylic, and they do really protect your hearing well. Plus, you're able to localize exactly where sound is coming from because the microphone now is inside your ear where it belongs, and so you're able to use this again. These I would not recommend just because they don't offer a lot of attenuation. Those are the three main styles of the ear level type of electronic ear protection. This is the latest style that's really popular with the hip hop crowd and goes great with pierced eyebrows. I tried one of these on and I thought, what am I doing here? They were really uncomfortable. They pinch your lobe, but so not highly recommended, but you can buy those over the counter at most sporting goods stores. This is what this one device looks like in the ear canal, the one-size-fits-all. if I were going to use the behind the ear, and these are fairly expensive. If you start looking around in the sporting goods, in the catalogs like Cabela's or other ones, you'll find that these devices range anywhere from about $200 or $300 or $400 a piece up to about $1,100 a piece for the high-end digital ear protection, which I think is really overkill. If I were going to use this type, which I've tried it, and like I said, this type also has a microphone that sits up here on top looking this way, so you get a lot of wind noise, a lot of body noise. I can't localize very well. But if I were going to use this type, I would definitely have a custom mold made for me so that I did not have to depend on this disposable tip. This is what the custom mic looks like, your volume control, your battery compartment. This is where the microphone is basically an in-the-ear hearing aid, a very basic in-the-ear hearing aid with a peak clipper. And the way all these devices work is they amplify soft sounds, but once the sound gets above 85 or 90 decibels, a peak clipper becomes involved and it immediately clips the signal, and so reduces the sound pressure level, and then the attenuation of the device takes over. So these are great. They're safe. The microphone on a hearing aid would be right here, but on these devices, because they don't want wind noise, the microphone is actually up in this helix area, and it also helps you localize sound a little bit better. Here are some tips to reduce firearm noise exposure. First of all, keep disposable HPDs or hearing protective devices on hand. You never know when you're going to use them, when you need them, but it's always, like I have a pair right here in my pocket, okay? I never know when I'm going to use them, even if I'm in a suit. You double protect with loud guns. If you're shooting big bore pistols, muzzle brakes, then I would really recommend using the inserts and the circumorals on top of that, because then you get not only the protection from the circumorals, but you get the protection from the inserts, and that's going to increase your protection quite a bit. There is a limit to how much you can protect because the skull starts to vibrate directly at higher levels, but you can get up to at least 50 decibels of attenuation, which is more than adequate. Consider smaller calibers. I see these guys out here, I see guys out in the field with 300 Magnums and 30-06s and 454 Casuls, and they're shooting these small little animals when you could use a 7mm 08 instead of that, and why not use a 20 gauge rather than a 12 gauge? You're going to reduce your sound pressure level significantly. Choose a single shot over bolt action or automatic or semi-automatic. The problem with the semi-automatic is with a deer rifle, you can shoot 7 shots in about 2 seconds, and that's an awful lot of energy for the ear to absorb, where with the old single shot, you only can shoot 1. And actually, this is what I'd recommend in terms of having a firearm that's effective, but not overkill. And most people that you have talked to that do hunt, especially deer, say, usually there's only 1 shot involved. So if you don't hit the animal on the first shot, then you can probably shoot 5 or 6 times more as they're running away, and you probably won't hit them on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 5th shot either. But they keep firing. You want to avoid high-risk situations like we just looked at. Always wear hearing protective devices when shooting. And then for hunting, I would recommend investing in the electronic ear protection. There's a query. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Thanks for an interesting presentation. I was wondering if you have any comparison to people who are using firearms professionally, such as soldiers, and what type of hearing protection they use, and what type of exposure and what type of hearing loss they have.
Yeah, the military is very concerned about that, and every time we go to NHCA, there's a presentation by the Army on that very subject, because you want to protect your hearing, but you don't want to lose your life. And that's the problem with combat situations. And so the Army has developed a series of non-linear ear protection where it's got, due to the design, and I won't get into the technical aspects, but due to the design, the louder the noise, the more it protects, and it lets low-level sound like conversation, or in a combat situation, maybe someone cocking a bolt or something like that. It allows you to hear that, but when there's a louder sound, it automatically attenuates it non-electronically, which is something that they've really been working on, because the electronics, there's a lot of problems with the electronics in general, but the military works on that. I can't tell you how many people over the years, veterans I've fit in the VA hospital. Will show you the numbers too. Guys coming back from World War II, although there's not very many of those people left, but we still do see them, or the Korean conflict, or Vietnam. Just because they get in combat situations, they're shooting 50 caliber big bore machine guns very quickly, tanks. Some of these tanks will generate sound, well over what we looked at here in terms of the 50 caliber guns that are mounted on tanks. So that is a huge problem in the military, and they are paying out a lot of money in compensation for hearing loss that occurred. But it's a very difficult situation, because you have to be able to hear if you're in a war, and so the hearing kind of becomes secondary to that. But that's the group, I think, that probably suffers the most hearing loss, would be the military. Professional shooters, like trap shooters and such, most of those people are geared up to the electronic stuff and are pretty much aware of it, although the older people, because it wasn't available to them, a lot of them do have hearing loss. Yes, sir?
I don't do it so much anymore, but I used to start track meets all the time with starting pistols.
Yeah. We see that all the time. It's this, and it's the left ear.
But my hearing protection was basically a cotton ball in my ear.
Yeah.
Does that work?
No. Here's my business card. Cotton protection give you about 4 or 5 decibel of attenuation. Very, very little. And I see track coaches, surprisingly, that's another subpopulation that we see, and I see a lot of them because of being around the university, because they'll go like this to protect the right ear, but they'll leave the left ear exposed. And one of my good friends is a starter, and he uses a little .38 caliber snub nose revolver, and hopefully with a blank in it. And he goes like this, and his left ear is just terrible. And because it doesn't take too many shots when you're this close, you're only about a foot away, and they'll kind of go like this, and the bore will be right in line with the ear. So that's another population that we do see a lot of, surprisingly. I didn't even think about that until the first time I saw someone like that, and it just makes an awful lot of sense.
I've got 2 questions, Mike. One is muzzleloader versus a regular rifle, and then the second one is the common thing is to go longer in terms of the shell, so there's more powder and more BBs in it. So I've gone from a 2 3/4 a rifle barrel or a shotgun barrel that shoots 2 3/4 to shoots 3.5-inch shells.
I hope you're using shoulder pad on that. And ear protection. Yeah, that the first part of that was Jim, the first part of that question. Yeah, the muzzle loader, it depends on the size of the bore. Most muzzle loaders have huge bores, 50 caliber and above. And now you're able to load those up with the modern muzzle loaders. I have a muzzle loader, I use 90 grains, but you can use 200-300 grains. So awful lot of powder. The black powder burns a little slower, but it builds pressure. So it's hard to compare because you don't have a good comparison bore size, but muzzle loaders are inherently loud because of the bore size and the amount of powder that these guys are using these days. Plus, surprisingly, you get a lot of noise from the cap itself. So it's like bang, bang in succession like that. And yeah, you're right about the magnums, the 12-gauge 3-inch Magnum, 3.5-inch Magnum is, more powder and a louder boom. So that's, that goes along with the rule of thumb about the bigger the bore and the more powder and the shorter the barrel. And the carbines are really a lot worse than the rifles too, and the pistols are the worst. Yes, sir.
Other questions?
I was wondering, this seems like a really an area in which stem cell research would be perhaps somewhat prominent. I mean, obviously, replacing some of these cells by growing them.
Yeah, we can grow them real well in a petri dish.
Right.
You know, they sprout right up there. But it's a whole different deal trying to get them to grow inside of a cochlea. And they're working on it. And actually, the Navy has a big project right now trying to regenerate hair cells and trying to develop a drug that you can take before exposure that will protect you. Yes, that is going on now. And actually, at I believe the University of Florida, I'm trying to think of his name. I believe it's Henderson is doing a lot of research with animals and trying to regenerate hair cells. And they have been able to do it effectively in the laboratory, but
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Implanting them and making them work is another
that
whole
little
step.
transition is a toughie.
But,
Yes.
but it seems not undoable to me.
Well, my grandfather was a professor of engineering, and he said, I remember him telling me when I was about 4 years old, there's no way in hell man's ever going to walk on the moon. Sorry, Grandpa. I think it is doable, and I think they will do it. They might not do it in our lifetime, but I think anything's doable when they put their mind to it and put their money to it. But it's been a low priority item, I think. And I think one of the problems with hearing loss in general is that it is an invisible handicap. I mean, if you have a hearing loss, you're not limping, there's no blood, you can function, you can drive to the show, you can drive your car. Now, if you had a vision problem, then I think they would be much more upset. The problem with the hearing is it affects your ability to communicate, and that affects your whole, I think, well-being and social interaction skills. So, but I think they will get there. I really do, but I think it's going to be a while. Yes, sir.
I had a question about an existing, I guess, anatomical protection that we have, and that would be damping from the stapedius and tensor tympani muscles.
Too slow.
Too slow?
Too slow.
Okay.
And it only lasts for 10 seconds. So industrial workers we always thought, well, the stapedius muscle is going to work great because these guys walking in noise is going to contract the stapedius and the tensor tympani is going to contract. And they're going to pull the eardrum out, which that's the way it works, and it deadens the sound, and it doesn't vibrate as well on the tympanic membrane. But the problem is that it decays after 10 seconds, and the second problem is that it is not quick enough to react to a 2 millisecond impulse. So the impulse has already gone through the cochlea by the time the muscle contracts.
Sure. That presumes that the muscles are relaxed at the time that the percussive sound hits. Is there any anticipatory tensing of those muscles to dampen that when the person anticipates and knows that the percussive sound is coming?
Well, I'm trying to do it right now. I'm having trouble.
We know that
I can't answer that question. I think that there probably is. I know that people report when they shoot at game, they never hear the report of the gun, and I don't know if that's related to the anticipation of the shot or what, or maybe it's just psychologically they're not thinking about the shot. I really can't answer that, but that is something that maybe we could train people to do. I would think that the military would have been in on that a long time ago, and I've never really heard of you being able to increase or decrease the latency of that reflex by trying to get it to do it psychologically. I don't know that would be possible.
I asked the question because I know in other physiological systems there are anticipatory motor responses like in balance. If you're anticipating a push or a perturbation in a direction, your motor system engages and changes your balance before you've been perturbed.
That would be an interesting area of research, and that might be a good doc project for somebody, and we might be able to answer that in a couple years for you. But my initial thought is that you probably cannot train that, or at least make it effective enough to be worthwhile.
Okay. Dr. Stewart, thank you for this presentation. We enjoyed it very much.
Thank you.